The dawn that broke over Sunspear bled crimson across the sky. A thin red veil stretched from the Sea of Dorne to the peaks of the Red Mountains. Heat shimmered already on the pale stone of the spear tower. Its ancient steps were warm beneath Arianne Martell's bare feet as she paused halfway down, fingers brushing the cool railing. Below, the Shadow City stirred. Merchants yawned and lifted dusty shutters. Fisher wives flung nets from the quays. A trio of sphinx-colored sand steeds stamped and huffed where they had been watered through the night. The whole of Sunspear, it seemed, breathed together in anticipation of a day unlike any other. In the great courtyard, banners of orange and gold snapped in a salt-laden wind. Arianne's own cloak, light linen the shade of apricots, whipped around her calves as she descended. Her father waited by a low table laid with pomegranate wine and lengths of vellum covered in neat Dornish script. Marching orders, provisioning lists, final letters to be carried by swift gull and swifter horse. Prince Doran's Gutach-swollen hands trembled when he lifted the goblet, but his dark eyes were steady as ironwood. "Too much blood has cried out for justice," he told her, voice soft as dune sand. "Oberyn, Elia, their children. Now Myrcella lies in the crypts, and the Seven Kingdoms do not even blink. If words win no answer, we must try spears." Arianne set her hand over his. "You trained me long for this. I will not break." "Nam?" She felt the eyes of her captains upon her. The one-eyed Sir Damon Sand polishing a dented copper shield. Andre Dalt, all sharp lines, reciting the oath he had sworn to protect her life at cost of his own. Nymeria Sand lounging lazy on the edge of the fountain, plucking a fig and biting into its rubied flesh. They looked to her as they once had to her uncle, the Red Viper. She would give them cause. "War will burn the realm," Prince Doran murmured. "But our fire has purpose." Arianne kissed him on both cheeks, tasting salt left by the sea air. Then she crossed the courtyard, passing under the spears of the Water Garden Guard, through the Barbican Arch, and out into a city already filling with pilgrims. Some wore homespun, some silk, but all made the sign of the seven as she rode by on her silver mare. They knew what this rising meant. Oberyn's vengeance, at last ready to unfurl its scorpion tail. 5 days later, the marching column threaded through the Boneway, a river of bronze helms, glinting in the high sun. Arianne rode at the front beside Prince Meryn Euronwood, whose scarred jaw looked carved from canyon stone. Every canyon wall echoed with the tramp of 8,000 spears. Ahead lay the Stormlands, wet air, green hills, and the looming fortress of Storm's End, whose maester's ravens would already be flapping frantic wings toward King's Landing. "You believe they will sue for peace before steel is drawn at the city gates?" Meryn asked. "I believe they will have no time." Arianne's gaze slid toward the southeast, where the Red Mountains melted into haze. "If our fleets strike the Gullet and the Blackwater at once, the main host may reach King's Landing before the Iron Throne wakes from its dream of Dornish submission." "The Iron Throne dreams of many things," Meryn grunted. "Mostly its own splinters." Lightning cracked on the horizon though the sky held no clouds. A mirage born of heat and distant storm. The Dornish marched on. Across the narrow sea, the Golden Company received word even before King's Landing. A battered cog out of Lys brought a sealed parchment to Captain General Alaquo Adares, called the Bull of Myr. He read it once, twice, then smiled that shark's grin known in half the free cities. "The snakes bear fangs," he told his lieutenants. "We sail within the week. If Aegon Targaryen lands at Storm's End in concert with the Dornish, the realm will crack like baked clay. But winds and tides are fickle friends, and ravens swifter still." By the time the Bull of Myr's galleys slipped their moorings, the Red Keep had received its own black-winged warning. King's Landing awoke to chaos. The bells of the Sept of Baelor tolled dawn service, just as the first reports reached the small council. A fleet of 30 Dornish Dromons rounding Massey's Hook. Storm banners flying from towers once Baratheon, now barren. Roads south of Blackhaven choked with spearmen in Sunhandan spear livery. Queen Regent Cersei Lannister swept into council in a blaze of crimson. She smelled of arbor blue roses and sweet essence of nightshade, her eyes glittering too bright. Traitors all! She hissed, slamming a rolled parchment onto the table. Martell dares spit at the throne, and half the Stormlands open their gates. Lord Giles Rosby coughed wetly. Grand Maester Pycelle tugged his beard and muttered of supply lines. But it was the pale, thin-lipped Lord Arain Waters, master of ships, who spoke with something like admiration. The Dornish chose their hour well, your grace. Our Blackwater fleet has not yet been replaced after the Tyrell treachery. Half the royal war galleys lie gutted at their posts. And the other half? Cersei snapped. Commanded by men who once bent knee to Renly. Their loyalty is elastic. End. Sir Adam Marbrand, newly named Lord Commander of the Gold Cloaks, cleared his throat. Give me coin in 4 days, your grace. I can fill the city with sellswords who answer only to me. 4 days, Cersei whispered, standing at the arched window overlooking the courtyard where the royal banners flapped. Can you buy me 4 days, Lord Commander? Marbrand bowed. I can try. On the Rosered, 3 leagues south of Blackhaven, the Dornish Van made camp in an abandoned orchard. Blossom drifted on warm air, settling like pale snow upon rows of bright leather tents. Arianne walked amid her soldiers without guards, accepting cups of pine honey mead, laughing with the girl archers of God's grace, who boasted they could pluck an apple off a man's helm at 100 paces. The army loved her, this she felt as surely as any hearth fire's warmth. Yet love could not still her thoughts. Beyond the orchard wall, the faintest rumble carried on the night breeze. Drums perhaps, or distant thunder. Nymeria Sand appeared at her elbow, hair pulled into a single braid wound with copper wire. Scouts returned an hour past. They counted torches on the Rose Route. Tyrell levies out of Bitterbridge, marching hard for the capital. How many? 6,000 foot, if their numbers hold. Less than half armed with plate. A smile touched Nim's mouth. In the Boneway that'd melt like tallow. We are not in the Boneway, Arianne said. She tasted the air as if it were wine. Send word to Sir Daemon and Andre Dalt. Light cavalry only. We harry them, burn wagons, scatter horses, then fall back. No pitched battle until we see the walls of King's Landing. Mend. Nymeria nodded once and strode away, a flicker of dusk in motion. Minutes later, Arianne climbed the orchard's low ridge. Moonlight spread silver over the rolling Stormlands, hills swelling like great dark waves toward the far horizon. Somewhere in that gloom stood Storm's End, the seat her mother had loved, the fortress no siege had ever cracked. Yet even stone could not stand forever. Salt and time wore it down, grain by grain. Just so, the Iron Throne. She closed her eyes and imagined the sound of waves upon the Blackwater, the thunder of hooves across the city's muddy fields, the screams of bells. When she opened them, the moon hung red as a drop of Martell wine. Inside the Red Keep, Tommen Baratheon, a boy of 11, knelt before the Iron Throne, his crown slipping sideways. He stared up at jagged iron and rotting leather, the blades of 1,000 conquered knights twisted into a monstrous seat. His voice shook. Mother, will they hurt Sir Pounce? Cersei swept down the throne steps in crimson silk. Sir Pounce is safe in your chambers, sweetling. But you must be brave now. She pushed the crown straight upon his golden curls. Braver than any king before you. He nodded, though tears brightened his eyes. When the great hall doors boomed open, admitting triangular daylight, the Queen's mask of composure cracked for the span of a heartbeat. Sir Kevan Lannister entered with Lord Merryweather at his side. The river gate has closed, Kevan announced. Small folk crowd the docks, seeking flight. I have posted 1,000 gold cloaks. Yet panic breeds quicker than pox. Them too. We will hold them. Cersei said, knuckles white on the boy king's shoulder. She wished fiercely that Jaime stood at her side, but her twin had not ridden from Riverrun since his last letter. Pages of guilt and farewell. Damn him. We require allies, Kevan pressed. The Reach sits in half revolt, since Mace Tyrell's shipwreck. If the Dornish promised bread and gold, Lord Tarly might bend knee. Then bend it back, Cersei snapped. Though she knew the hollowness of the threat, she dismissed them with a gesture and turned to her son, whispering tales of ancient lions who feared no serpent. Along the King's Road north of Brindlewood, the first flickers of battle lit night like summer lightning. André Dalt led 300 light horse in swirling raids, lances darting, torches cast among casks of reach grain, arrows hissing overhead. The Tyrell column slipped into confusion, oxen bellowing as wagons burned, pikemen stumbling through smoke. By dawn, 20 Arthury supply carts lay gutted, red and gold roses trampled in the mud. It was war in miniature, a taste of the feast to come. Arianne received the news without triumph. Each burned cart meant hungry peasants somewhere. Yet hunger already stalked Dorne, and the Seven Kingdoms had watched unmoved. Let them watch her now. Prince Meryn urged the host on, 60 miles in 3 days. Dornish banners fluttered as the first ranks descended the final ridge toward the Blackwater Rush. There, beyond Marsh and Meadow, rose King's Landing, sprawl of pitched roofs, gilded septs, smoke curling from 1,000 chimneys. The high walls glittered where new iron sheathing caught the light. Behind them, the towers of the Red Keep stood bloodred in sunset, like fingers lifted in warning. The invasion had reached the gates. The Dornish camps unfolded in a crescent from the Kingswood to the mouth of the Blackwater. Thousands of canvas pavilions rippling in evening breeze. Signal fires blazed on every rise, casting long shadows over siege towers, still hammered together under torchlight. In the shallows, Bastard of God's Grace commanded 20 launches fitted with scorpion bows, their tips lacquered black. Farther out in the river mouth, Dromans formed a half-moon, orange sails furled, waiting for wind. Arianne rode survey with Sir Daemon Sand as dusk swallowed the field. "Tomorrow," he said, thumb tapping the pommel of his Caner Zord, "King's Landing wakes to a serpent's kiss. Not a kiss," she answered, voice low. "A bite." Inside her command tent, maps lay weighted by daggers, ink still damp on the newest marks. Weak points in the Mudgate, reports of grain stores in Fleabottom, rumors of tunnels beneath Visenia's hill left unguarded. She read them all, drinking honeyed wine that tasted of last year's summer. She would drink no wine on the morrow. Sleep came in slivers, the hush of canvas, the distant hush of waves. Before dawn, a horn blast roused the camp. Flames capped torches in 1,000 hands, banners lifted. Armor clinked like winter hail. The sky was pearl gray when the vanguard formed. Prince Meryn's heavy spears at center, Dornish crossbow regiments on either wing. Behind them, siege towers creaked forward, ropes groaning. Arianne rode to the front. The Blackwater glittered gold at sunrise, yet the river smelled of rot where bodies from old wars still drifted below the surface. She turned her mare and raised her voice. "People of the sands," her words carried over the massed host, echoing from shields. "For too long we have bowed our heads to a throne that robbed our mothers and mocked our grief. No more. Today we take what fire and blood owe us. Follow me, and I will show the Iron Throne the face of Dorne." A roar rose, raw, fierce, rolling outward as if the desert itself had found a throat. Drums struck like thunder beneath, and then they marched. From the ramparts of the city wall, Serad and Marbrand watched the wave approach. Dust rose behind it, dimming the sunrise. His gold cloak fluttered in the breeze. "Signal the trebuchets," he ordered, voice flat. "Let them taste stone before steel." Stone they tasted. Great blocks flipped from Aegon's Hill and arced across the Blackwater bank, smashing earth and bone where they landed. The Dornish answered with scorpion bolts that hissed through the morning air to drive into crenellations. Shattering shields, flinging men from parapets. Smoke spiraled. Ziga towers crawled through mud, their roofs slick with wet hides against firepots. Within the city, thousands of small folk huddled in septs, or crowded the fishmonger's square, praying for deliverance. Bread riots broke before the hour was out. The gold cloaks rode roughshod along cobbled alleys, sabers flashing. And still, the Dornish pressed closer. At midday, the first tower ground against the wall near the Gate of the Gods. Hooks clanged, drawbridge dropped. Spears met in screaming tangle upon the walkway. Daron Dalt, the Lemon Knight, fell with an arrow through his throat. Beside him, a hedge knight from the Stormlands leapt across the gap and vanished into the sea of orange plumes. Arianne, from her vantage on the embankment, saw the city's towers wreathed in smoke. She smelled pitch, hot metal, the iron tang of blood. The rhythm of war thrummed through her bones. Yet victory was not assured. Reports spoke of Lannister reserves massing behind the Dragon Pit, of Tyrell knights riding north from Highgarden, of sell sails hired in Lys. King's Landing would not fall in a day. She turned to Nymeria Sand. Send runners to the river flank. The moment tide turns, our Dromons advance. We storm the mud gate at dusk. Nymeria's grin flashed white. Dusk it is. A good time for shadows. Inside Maegor's holdfast, Queen Cersei paced a chamber whose walls thrummed with distant impact. Her handmaids whispered prayers. She ignored them. Every flower-painted tile beneath her slippered feet felt brittle, ready to crack. A page appeared, breathless. Your Grace, Lord Harris Swift says the Valyrian gates stand. They will stand longer if Lord Harris is there defending them. Cersei snapped. The boy scurried off. She poured herself a goblet of Hippocras, drained it, then pulled a crimson dirk from her sleeve. If the city fell, she would not flee like some gutter rat. Better Targaryen wildfire than Martell arrows. Better ashes than chains. On the tower steps she met Grand Maester Pycelle, who carried a leather scroll case and smelled of stale camphor. His chin trembled. My queen, ravens from Old Town. The High Septon offers the city his prayers. Wow. Tell him to pray for himself. Cersei said, pushing past. Outside, smoke climbed the sky in pillars, black against a bleeding sun. As afternoon waned, the black water stank of pitch and churned mud. Dornish war galleys rode upriver, archers loosing arcs of fire-tipped arrows that hissed down on timber palisades. At the mud gate, serpents of flame licked along tar-soaked ramparts. Casks shattered, scattering oil, flames whooshed skyward, and yet defenders poured sand from burlap sacks, sluiced water by the barrel, beat back ladders with spiked poles. Each time a Martell banner neared the parapet, a billow of scalding steam or tumbling masonry flung the attackers back. Dusk settled into crimson twilight when Arianne signaled the reserve. 400 heavy spear, and with them, the sand snakes themselves. Nymeria led, twin daggers gleaming. Tyene wore a smile that promised poison. Obara carried a whip and morning star. They cut through the press like storms made flesh. When Tyene mounted the wall, she dragged King's Landing sergeant over the edge by his beard, laughing like a child at festival. But within the gatehouse, the mechanism still turned, hidden behind oak doors banded in iron. And onto that door came a hush. Then the shattering crack of a giant ram, log bound in studded bronze, swung by 20 hands, driven forward with every chant of Elgia, Elgia. Wood splintered, iron screeched. On the third blow the bar tore free. The mud gate burst inward. Into the breach thundered Dornish spear points, bright as sun on steel. Smoke and sweat clung to Arianne's lungs as she spurred through the shattered arch, hooves clattering on stone. King's Landing had eaten 1,000 armies. She would not be one more swallowed. Flags unfurled behind her, orange sun, red spear, rippling amid sparks that leapt like fireflies. Inside the gate district, narrow lanes twisted between tanners' shops and potters' sheds. Small folk fled up ragged staircases, clutching children. Crossbow quarrels flicked from hidden windows. One struck Sir Daemon's pauldron and skittered away. Arianne's column pressed on, turning toward the Street of Flower, where wagons still smoldered from last winter's riot. At Cobbler's Square, gold cloaks rallied beneath a makeshift barricade. Adam Marbrand himself stood astride a destrier, pale hair loose around a face streaked with soot. He raised a crimson-stained blade in salute. "We yield the gate," he called across the gap, voice carrying over the crackle of fire. "But not the city." Arianne drew up, helm under her arm. "Surrender and live." Marbrand only smiled. Then he spurred his horse. The clash sounded like breaking thunderheads. Spears split wood. Shields rang. Arianne's mare reared as a crossbow bolt clipped its flank. Through the melee she glimpsed Nymeria's braids snapping as she leapt the barricade. Obarus Morningstar crunching through lacquered breastplate. Sir Daemon dancing sideways to bury his Koenigsword in a gold cloak's eye. She lost sight of Marbrand. Smoke swirled, thick as fog on the green blood. Sounds grew muffled, as though war had sunk under water. And then, the ground shook with fresh eruption. Somewhere nearer the hill, a plume of green flame spiraled above the skyline, bright as summer glass. "Wildfire. Back!" Arianne bellowed, voice hoarse. Back to the river. But retreat was no simple pivot. Fires burned behind them, streets choked with fallen. Trapped between inferno and iron, the Dornish vanguard bled as night fell. Arianne hacked her way to an alley mouth, searching for clear ground. In one flicker of torchlight, she caught Nymeria's face, blood-masked, eyes alight, and knew they would not reach the embankment before midnight. King's Landing had bitten back. By midnight, the siege lines glittered with cressets. A crescent of wounded men limped behind the front, cursing softly. The Dornish had seized the mud gate, but no more. The city's heart remained a knot of red walls and green fire. Arianne towed the splayed petals of a crushed rose where it lay in dirt. Reach heraldry, trampled in retreat. Prince Marin joined her, bandaging a split brow. "They've set half the Blackwater aflame," he reported. "Wildfire floats atop the river. Our galleys dare not approach until current changes. How many lost? 300 dead. Twice that wounded. Adam Marbrand escaped." "Menders show." Arianne nodded, taking it like a draught of bitter wine. "This city will not be starved. We must find allies within. You think the small folk will rise? They rose once for bread against Joffrey. Now they starve under Cersei. We bring grain. We open the gates for them." Meron looked toward the glowing skyline, where the high sept rose dark against green fire. "The small folk fear wildfire more than hunger. Then we douse the wildfire." She turned to her maps, candlelight catching the edge of her resolve. "Tomorrow before sunrise, send divers. Find the vaults beneath the Guildhall of Alchemists. Flood them from the river. Let their green demon drown. Oh, and if the guild defends, poison." A quiet knife in the dark. She met his gaze. "We did not march to the gates of the dragon only to slink home with tails between legs. We end this." High above in the Tower of the Hand, Cersei Lannister watched pillars of emerald gloom writhe through night like serpents. She pressed fingers to the cold glass of the window. Each plume cost coin and life and hope for her son's reign. But she would burn the city to cinders before she'd let Dornish spears drag her child through streets in chains. Behind her, Maester Qyburn emerged from shadows. "The dwarf's wildfire stores burn quicker than expected," he ventured. "Shall I order the pyromancers to husband what remains?" "When the fire goes out," Cersei said softly, "the snakes will creep in." "No, Qyburn. Let the fire spread." He dipped his head. "As you command, your grace." "Then, there is another matter. Our ravens from Myrcella's tomb have not returned. Tar coated their wings. A ritual defilement perhaps, Martell sorcery, if one believes the more outlandish whispers. Menarwa. Cersei's laugh was brittle. "Let them play at witchcraft. I have dragons of my own." Her gaze slid to the iron-bound chest on the table. Dragon fire powder, stolen from Korth traders, enough to crack a wall with roar and spark. She imagined the courtyard awash in flame, Dornish banners curling into ash. "Ready it," she said, "in the tunnels beneath the sept, under their holy altar." If the city must die, the gods will die with it. Before dawn, Dornish divers slipped beneath the river's oily surface. Leather wineskins clutched in teeth. They swam towards sewer grates whose rusted bars parted under silent saws. Cold water carried them into black cisterns, echoing vaults where wildfire barrels floated like bloated corpses. Each diver sliced 2-3 barrel seams, stuffing iron stoppers with wet clay, so the green sludge oozed but did not ignite. They left markers of red silk for the sappers who followed. At first light, Nymeria sand led 200 barefoot spearwives through the sewers. Their torches spewed oily smoke that coated stone with pitch. They moved like shades, silent but for drip of water and distant roar of battle up above. When they reached the cisterns, they drove spikes into walls, splitting brick to let river water gush. Wildfire hissed, dulled, drowned. Hours later, flames above the mudgate guttered and died, choking on their own smoke. Dornish cheers rose as scorpion crews rolled forward once more. Yet the defenders were far from broken. Within the Red Keep, Cersei's Sellswords, mangy as alley wolves, garrisoned every stairwell. Lord Giles Rosby's coin bought Summer Isles crossbowmen who aimed as sure as daybreak. And rumor whispered of a monstrosity in black plate, Sir Robert Strong, whose strokes felled men like wheat before scythe. Terror walked beside the Lannister lion. Also within those walls skulked Tyrion, the disgraced imp, summoned secretly by Kevan to counsel Tommen. He knew wildfire as a man knows his own stench. He smelled it still in the corridors. Madness, he told his uncle. And mother's milk to our foes if Cersei plunges the city in green fire. Kevan raked fingers through graying hair. What would you advise? Open the granaries. Feed the people. Let them see the Queen's mercy. Starving men wield torches quicker than swords. Da. Kevan exhaled. And if the Queen forbids? Then the Queen may need reminding whose throne this is, Tyrion said, tapping the pommel of his dagger. Kings are made by subjects, uncle. Even lion cubs can be eaten when packs grow hungry. Night brought another truce by necessity. Both armies licked wounds in shadow. In the Dornish command pavilion, Aerion scribes recorded casualty tallies while healers stitched flesh by lantern light. Sir Daemon leaned on his cane, recounting rumors overheard from captured gold cloaks, a secret store of grain beneath Flea Bottom, Sellswords deserting en masse after not seeing pay. What they lack is coin and bread, Aerion mused, leaning over her maps. And I have both. She penned a proclamation in bold, slanted script, sealed with Sunhound spear. Bread for the children of King's Landing. Safety for those who take no arms against Dorne. Indulgence of debt, and reward for any who open a postern gate or guide her spears through forgotten tunnels. Copies of the proclamation she tied to 500 ravens' legs, loosed at dawn. Others she nailed to the smoking doors of the Sept of Baelor and the brothels beneath the Street of Silk. By midday, hungry knots of small folk crept beyond the battered mudgate. Dornish kitchens ladled onion broth, served flatbread thicker than a man's thumb. Hesitation melted. Within hours, a tide of refugees flowed outward. Mothers, babes, men too old or young to fight, trading whispered tales of a kind princess of Dorne who broke bread with beggars. Cersei raged at their departure, ordering crossbows loosed into the throng. The bolts mostly missed, but each shot seeded new fury. A baker flung a stone at a gold-helmed guard. A cooper hurled a mallet. Soon crowds pressed the gate of the gods from within, shrieking for mercy, for bread. When the hinges groaned, Marbrand's garrison pressed back with shields, but numbers told. A torrent of small folk burst through, trampling 7 guards and spilling into Dornish lines, where they knelt and begged protection. Aerion granted it. By the 5th day, the Iron Throne's banners hung in tatters over King's Landing's outer district. The Fishmonger's Square flew the Dornish sun. The Dragon Pit Hills smoldered but bore their colors. Yet the Red Keep stood inviolate, a crimson thorn in the serpent's paw, and within its halls Cersei readied her final gambit. In the cellars beneath the Sept of Baelor, Qyburn's silent novices loaded kegs of dragon fire powder onto bolt carts, rolling them through secret passages toward the Storm Drum Gate. Overhead in the throne room, Tommen wept on the barbed seat, hands bleeding where points pricked his skin. "Be brave," Cersei crooned, brow against his. "Remember the song Father sang, the rains of Castamere." "I want Margaery," Tommen whispered. "Margaery's in the dungeons," Cersei said. "And the dungeons keep her safe." She turned when Kevan strode in, Tyrell guard at his back. "Sister," he began, but her stare froze him. "Your lion's heart falters, brother. I would save Tommen, not immolate him." Kevan's hand settled on his sword pommel. "Tyrion was right. Our people starve while we hoard fire. Open the gates. Parley with Martell." "Parley?" Cersei's laughter rang sharp. "Daddy, Martell murdered Myrcella. They want my son's head. They shall have ash instead." Kevan drew steel. Guards moved like chess pieces, but in the end, steel clashed on steel. Tommen screamed. Cersei shoved him behind the throne. Lannister fought Lannister beneath blades of melted kings, until Sir Robert Strong's massive shadow filled the hall. His mace fell like doom, and Kevan Lannister's sword arm shattered beneath its weight. Cersei kissed her brother's blood-spattered cheek. "You chose the weak." Kevan's eyes glazed, mouth working silent words, before Strong's second stroke ended breath. Cersei wiped gore from her lips, then knelt by her shaken son. "Listen well, my sweet. The gods test us, but Lannisters are forged in lion's fire." Outside, the final siege began. Dawn of the sixth day. Thick fog clung to the black water like rotting wool. A hush lay over camp and city alike. Arianne paced alone, sword at hip. In the stillness, she heard gulls crying madness over fog. Today, she felt, would decide life or legend. When the sun climbed, the fog burned away to reveal new banners on the eastern hills. Red and black dragons, the griffin crowned, golden company standards. A murmur rippled along Dornish lines. "So the exiled Aegon comes at last," Arianne thought, almost smiling. Perhaps destiny had a taste for poetry. Dragons and suns, side by side before the throne that birthed them both. Prince Marin arrived, breath plume in chill morning air. Word from the north flank, the Golden Company offers alliance. To whom? To us, Princess. They bear parchment sealed in drakebone. They propose joint assault at sunset. They swear Aegon Targaryen rightful heir. Arianne looked toward the Red Keep's high towers, vision sharp, .1. Inside those walls, a boy king clutched his mother's hand. Justice called her forward. Yet justice alone would not heal the realm. Could the Seven Kingdoms suffer two claimants? Could Dorne bear one more betrayal after fire and injury? "Bring me their envoy," she said, wheel of future spinning inside her chest. "Let us see if dragons still know honor." And the day rolled on, banners snapping, spears glinting under the merciless sun. Two armies facing a fortress that bled behind shuttered gates. Within those gates, a queen set fuses of black powder, ready to marry her child to ruin. Beyond them, a princess weighed vengeance against tomorrow. And all across King's Landing, small folk whispered of bread and mercy. And the towering green flames no prayer could quench. The city held its breath, caught between serpent and lion, dragon and wildfire, brittle as spun glass at the heart of a continent on the brink. And so the hush before the storm lingered, stretching the hours thin, until the bells would toll again. Not for dawn service, but for doom or deliverance. Only the gods, or perhaps the sands of Dorne, could know which note they would strike when the towers rang. The day waited, the realm waited, and every man, woman, and child could feel the tremor in the stones, the subtle tightening of the world, as if the seven themselves leaned forward to see whether the sun would rise red again, or sink at last beyond the black water, swallowed by fire and night. The envoy arrived at midday, a lone rider on a lean gray courser draped in black and red. The horse's flanks frothed with sweat by the time it trotted before Ariane's command pavilion, yet its head remained high and proud, as if it understood the gravity of the rider's errand. Dust streaked the man's gilded breastplate. Rubies winked about the hilt of the sword at his side. When the guards ushered him in, he doffed his helm to reveal a sharp Myrish face seamed by salt and wind, and eyes the color of beaten copper. "I am John Connington," he said, dropping to one knee on the carpet-mounted earth. "Griffon, Lord of Griffin's Roost, once hand to your king Aerys, now commander to his grandson. I bring greetings from Prince Aegon Targaryen, first of his name, rightful heir to the Iron Throne." "Then shall." A murmured rustle slipped around the pavilion. Captains shifting, maps fluttering, the wind plucking tent seams, yet Ariane remained very still, assessing. Connington's tone balanced on a knife edge between supplication and iron. The weight of a long exile clung to each word. She gestured him to rise. "My father taught me to honor envoys," she said, pouring pomegranate wine into a shallow bowl. "Drink, sir, and speak your prince's mind." Connington accepted the bowl without lowering his gaze. "Dorne's spears have cracked the city's shell. Let the dragon's fire split its heart. Together, our forces may topple Cersei by week's end. Prince Aegon seeks alliance sealed by oath before the gods. And perhaps in time by marriage, if your highness so wills." The offer lay shimmering like the wine between them. Marriage, to fix Dorne to a dragon reborn, could stitch ancient wounds. Yet Ariane recalled the Dornish dead outside the mud gate, the smoke still coiling above the city, and she sensed that the dragon's scales hid fire and shadow alike. She sipped once, then set the bowl aside. "Prince Aegon claims birth in the shadow of Dragonstone." She said softly, "Yet the world knows only whispers. Will you unveil his truth at dawn's light? Will you swear us bread and justice for the small folk who follow our banners?" "I will swear it," Connington answered without pause. "All Aegon's oaths rest upon mercy and restoration. The realm is wounded, but under him it may heal." "And so," he spoke like a man who had rehearsed those words across 1,000 leagues of bitter ocean. Yet beneath the certainty Ariane sensed desperation, the urgency of a dream that might crumble if not seized now. She rose, the camp's dust sifting through gaps in the floorboards to swirl around her boots. "Tell your prince that the son of Dorne he must march at sunset with half his company under Dornish colors. He must feed the city's hungry with grain from his ships. And he must kneel beside me on the steps of Baelor's Sept before we draw the final sword. There, before gods and folk, he will proclaim that no child of Elia Martell shall ever again know fear." "And no." Connington bowed so low his gray-gloved fingers brushed the carpet's fringe. "It shall be done." When he departed, Nymeria Sand emerged from behind the pavilion's central pole, silent as the cats that haunted the water gardens at dusk. Her braid lay coiled over one shoulder like a copper serpent. "Will he keep his word?" she asked. "Not through blood alone," Ariane replied. "We bind him with bread and witnesses. If he breaks faith, the realm will see and turn upon him. But perhaps he will not break." "Perhaps," Nymeria echoed, her eyes gleaming with all that perhaps implied in war. Across the Blackwater, the decks of the Golden Company's flagship rang with hammer blows and shouted orders. Pikemen tested ash hafts, archers strung recurved bows of Iban hardwood. Kettle drums boomed to keep cadence as the soldiers formed into ranks upon the riverbank. Above their heads streamed banners of the leaping golden skull, and new ones stitched overnight. A red sun within a golden spear, twined with a three-headed dragon wrought in silver thread. The sight stirred old memories in the ranks. Some had marched for Bittersteel, some for Melees, all for coin and the hope of crossing home. Now, for the first time in memory, they crossed not as dogs of war, but as claimants to the realm's heart. In King's Landing the bells tolled noon, though their peals sounded dull, muffled by smoke and distance. Within the Red Keep's towers, Cersei Lannister paced a path she had worn thin upon the floor rushes. Every knock at the chamber door quickened her pulse. Every caw of a crow beyond the arrow slit pricked her with dread of another bad news scroll. She thought of wildfire vaults flooding, of gates splintering, of a city that no longer belonged to her. Qyburn approached with his usual silent glide. "The fuses are laid," he murmured. "Powder beneath the septi and the lower vaults. At your word we can split this hill from crown to root." Cersei closed her eyes. A hiss of breezes slid under the sill, carrying the faintest scent of lavender from the burned gardens. Her father had once taught her that a ruler must be flint, yet flint could break beneath a hammer's blow. Dragons and serpents conjoined outside. Inside, betrayal whispered in every hall. Her own uncle lay cooling in the sept cellar, his blood dried upon the stones. She drew a breath that scraped her throat raw. "Not yet," she said. "Wait until they breach the inner gate. When you see their banners on the stair, then light the fuse." "Qyburn bowed low, his pale hands tucked into voluminous sleeves. He withdrew, leaving her alone with the weight of the decision, the sword of wildfire hanging by a single thread of her resolve. As sun dipped toward the city's western walls, a hush spread over the Dornish lines. Armorers ceased their hammering. Cooks tamped hearth fires low. Even the hobbled horses seemed to sense that this was no common dusk, but the hinge upon which the morrow would turn. At the center of the encampment, two armies gathered between ranks of torches. Dornish spears shimmering like a field of new wheat, and Golden Company veterans in tarnished plate, the seams of their surcoats bright with fresh dye. Arianne rode forth on her silver mare, her cloak replaced by polished breastplate streaked in the orange light. Beside her strode John Connington, in a cuirass of blackened steel, chased with red enamel griffins. Behind him, a slender youth advanced beneath a white canopy, borne by 4 crimson-robed squires. He wore no helm, moon-pale hair fell to his shoulders, and a brooch of 3 dragon heads fastened his cloak. His face, high-cheeked and grave, bore the unmistakable stamp of Valyria. A hush fell thicker than any fog when he halted before Arianne. He did not kneel at once. Instead he drew a small dagger from his belt and slashed it across his palm. Blood welled scarlet in the torchlight. He held the cut high so all might see. "Blood of the dragon and of Dorne," he proclaimed, his voice clear but soft, still untested by the arena of kings. "My mother, Princess Elia of House Martell, died so I might live. Her queenly blood will not be shed in vain. I pledge bread to the starving, justice to the scorned, and alliance to the realm that sheltered her. By my life and by my death, if need be, I swear it." Only then did he sink to one knee before the Dornish princess. A hush deepened still, so heavy it seemed the night sky itself bent low to listen. Arianne dismounted, and placed her ungloved hand around his bleeding fist. His skin felt warm as an ember. The pulse that hammered beneath told of youth, yes, but also of fear. "I am Arianne Nymeros Martell," she said loud enough for the lines to carry the words back a dozen ranks. "Granddaughter of the will of the Sandship, daughter of Dorne, princess of the land where sun scorns shade. I take your oath, Prince Aegon of House Targaryen, and bind it to my own. May the gods, old and new, strike us down should we fail it." She pressed his bleeding hand to her brow. Scarlet streaked across her skin like war paint. From the Dornish host a great shout rose, echoed a heartbeat later by the ragged cry of the Golden Company. Drums thundered. On the river, Drummond's answered with booming war horns that rippled across the dark water. Prince Aegon rose, his wounded palm clasped in hers. In the glow of 100 torches their shadows merged. The dragon and the sun become one darker silhouette that stretched across the trampled grass toward King's Landing's blood-black wall. Inside the city, the populace felt the change like the turning of a tide. Grain carts bearing Martell and Targaryen sigils rolled through the mud gate, under guard of sand snakes and griffins alike, handing out round loaves still warm from field ovens. On the street of Flower, gold cloaks had grown thin. Half their number deserted overnight, melting into the alleys, with new cloaks stripped from fallen Dornishmen. At bakeries shuttered for fear of riot, the troops broke locks, and delivered bread into waiting arms. Tyrion Lannister watched from a second-story window, candle in hand, his breath frosting the filthy glass. The realm turned like a wheel and crushed those caught beneath. Yet perhaps, he mused, one could slip free before the spoke rolled over one's skull. He set the candle on the sill and turned toward Bronn, who lounged against a broken dresser gnawing a strip of dried snake meat. "They feed the small folk," Tyrion said. "That's half the battle won without raising a sword." "Aye," Bronn agreed. "Starvin' flock makes for easy pickin'. Give 'em bread and they'll cheer any crow in bright colors." "Which leaves us," Tyrion murmured, stroking the scar where his nose once bulked, "a city that we know better than any Dornish captain. Time to choose a side." Bronn smirked. "Whichever side gets me gold and babes in feather beds. I thought you fought for thrill. I fight for what I can hold. Thrill don't buy tile roofs." Bronn tossed the meat scrap aside. "So, imp, we siding with your sister or the snakekin?" Tyrion stared out at the flicker of torches in the square below, where children dipped crusts in steaming broth. "I saved this city once, and she tried to have me drowned in the black water. The queen's fuse grows shorter than my legs. When it burns down, everything goes bright green." He cocked his head. "I suppose I should like to live to be murdered another day." Bronn laughed. "I'll fetch my spear." Midnight clad the city in cloying dark, punctured by the wink of watchfires upon the walls. Between torch posts, shapes moved, golden company scouts, scaling postern stairs held by half-hearted Lannister levies, Dornish engineers rolling trebuchet frames into new positions on Aegon's Hill, barefoot beggars slipping sacks of sand to Nymeria sand sappers for barricade A mapmaker on the river row might have marked new borders hour by hour, the front lines creeping like ivy across crumbling brick. In the Red Keep's throne room, Cersei stood before the Iron Throne, her fingertips bleeding where she had gripped too tight. News reached her in whispers: mutiny among her sellsword captains, rumor of griffins roosting at the Dragon Gate, Tommen's tears soaking his nightshirt. She bit her own lip until iron flooded her mouth. Better to taste that than defeat. Sir Robert Strong joined her, immense and silent, his blue-black armor reflecting rushlight in oily sheens. Cersei felt safer seeing her champion, yet the hush he exuded chilled like deep water. "Stay close," she whispered. "When the hour comes, carve a path through anything that moves. If the city burns, we flee by the hidden quay beneath the Tower of the Hand. A galley waits. We will return with allies and fury." Strong inclined his covered head. The lantern nearest him trembled as if in fear. Steps rang behind. Lord Arrayne Waters entered, fair hair lank with sweat. He held a crumpled dispatch. "Your Grace, the riverfront is lost. Their Drommons broke our last chain boom and slip into the harbor. I've scuttled what ships we cannot man but..." Cersei slapped him hard enough to spin his face sideways. "Coward Datar." Waters staggered, blood blooming on his lip. "Your Grace, I did only what..." "Enough." She stalked past him toward the high windows that overlooked the black water. Slivers of torchlight danced upon the water where warships sailed unopposed. It seemed the world beyond that pain belonged to her enemies, the glass an invisible wall between her and defeat. She pressed her palm flat, imagining it were a knife slicing a throat. "Light the fuse at dawn," she said without turning. "I will give this city one more sunrise. If the gates still hold, we will rule from ashes." Dawn's first trembling rose-gold light found the skies above King's Landing black, with smoke from a dozen minor fires and one major conflagration near the Hook. Sails of 3 Targaryen Drommons beat the wind upriver, slender as dagger points. On the bank opposite the city, Dornish engineers finished lashing raw oxhide over the tall frames of their last 2 siege towers, christened Sandsteed and Viper's Tongue by the cheering soldiers. At Prince Aegon's command tent, Connington laid parchment maps across a crate, while Arianne studied them, Nymeria on her left shoulder like a bronze bird and Sir Daemon on her right with his ever-tapping cane. "We strike at sun high," Connington said, his finger tracing a line along the fishmonger's square. Golden Company will bait the Red Keep's reserves by feigning a push through the Gate of the Gods. When Lannister forces concentrate there, Dornish towers advance from the Mudgate. Our sappers collapse 2 adjacent stretches of wall to create ramp slippage. And the wildfire? Nymeria asked. The dousing appears to have worked, Connington answered, though wariness quickened his voice. Still, we hold our own reserves of river water and sand in casks at every breach point. Arianne nodded. Very well. But one more thing. We rescue the Queen's prisoners before the sept crumbles. Myrcella's body must be borne home, and the Tyrell girl released. Dorne will not be seen strangling innocents. Now. Connington hesitated, then inclined his head. She may bolster our claim if wed to the prince in time. An olive branch to the reach. Nymeria snorted. Olive branch or chain? Doesn't matter, so long as it binds. Then the captains dispersed to marshal their ranks. Arianne lingered, gaze drifting toward the distant spires of the sept that glowed pale in dawn haze. She pictured its marble floors powdered with dust after wildfire's breath, and felt a pang, anger for beauty on the verge of ruin, sorrow for the small folk crushed beneath high games. She tried to remember her uncle's laughter, quick and sharp as a spear thrust. Oberyn would have reveled in this hour. She would not shame his memory. She lifted her sword and inspected the edge, still honed from last night's wet, glimmering like a sliver of sunrise. When she sheathed it, resolve settled within her ribs like a second heart. Tyrion and Bronn emerged from the sally port behind the dragon pit, disguised in the tattered cloaks of gold cloaks, whose throats Bronn had slit an hour earlier. They towed a mule cart, stacked with barrels of cheap Dornish red, though the staves rattled with more than wine. Their destination lay just beyond the crumbled shell of an old tannery, a narrow tunnel entrance, half submerged by rubble, when the wildfire store beneath the Guildhall had drowned. Rumor said the passage once connected the dragon stables to the Hill of Rhaenys. The city had forgotten it. But not Tyrion. Bronn wiped dust from his brow. Tunnel looks tight. As your mother, Tyrion quipped, then softened. Apologies. Nerves. He glanced up the hill. No patrols in sight. The smell of smoke and tallow dominated, edged by a whiff of vinegar from ruptured pickling jars down the next alley. Bronn hoisted the nearest barrel, hefting its weight. Wildfire? No. Something the city deserves more. Bread, and a small fortune in silver stags. Spread quick enough. Silver can tip any scale. Bronn's grin sharpened. You mean to bribe your way to the gatehouse? In part, Otto. Also, to win goodwill for whomever takes the throne next. I may be many things, but I'm not fond of being drawn and quartered by starving mobs. Then see. They slid into the tunnel, shadows swallowing them. The mule balked, but Bronn coaxed her forward with an old sellsword's lullaby die. In the narrow dark, Tyen's thoughts hopped like nervous sparrows. Cersei's face as the fuse hissed. Would she truly destroy her own son's crown? Yes, he decided she would, unless someone stopped her. They trudged on, deeper into stale air, guided by faint drafts that breathed from cracks overhead. Behind them, the city groaned under weight of armies preparing their heaviest blow. Hours later, the sun crowned the sky, and the battle chorus began in earnest. Trebuchets on Aegon's Hill hurled kegs of pitch that burst like black suns against the Red Keep's outer curtain. In reply, Lannister catapults launched iron-shod barrels, packed with stones that pulverized siege engines into splinters. Arrows danced in the no-man's land between forces, so thick that light seemed a shaken blanket of night. At the Gate of the Gods, Golden Company pikemen marched in tight phalanx, their war horns droning the old Valyrian call, Aegon! 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 Lannister defenders met them with a wall of shields riveted with lions. The crash echoed like thunder along the narrow way, and blood ran in rivulets down the cobbles. The feint worked. From the Red Keep, fresh detachments of city guard galloped toward the Gate of the Gods, abandoning the Mudgate's crumbling parapets. Their commander, a stout knight in gilded gorget, shouted orders to plug the breach, unaware that 2 siege towers crawled behind the Dornish first line, under cover of scorpion and ballista fire. Viper's tongue reached the wall first. Its bridge thundered down with a roar. Sandsteed ground forward a breath later, disgorging spearmen in orange cloaks, who swept along the rampart in a tide of bronze. Arianne herself led the second wave, helm glinting, shield emblazoned with the blazing sun. On the parapet, she locked shields with an aging cell sail wielding a rusted morning star. He spat a curse and swung. She slipped beneath. Stabbing upward, blood fanned her cheek. Elsewhere, Nymeria's knives flashed, leaving thin red smiles across throats. Soon the Mudgate Tower belonged to Dorne, its own banners cast down, replaced by the sun and spear flying high. "Open the portcullis," Daemon Sand shouted, planting his cane sword into the hoist mechanism's last defender. Chain links rattled as pulleys turned. The gateway yawned like a broken jaw, and mounted cavalry surged inside the city, hooves sending up sprays of mud thick with years of filth. Within the ward, Prince Aegon pressed forward with 200 household guards. He fought gracefully, but each sword stroke revealed his inexperience. Connington shadowed him, parrying blows aimed at the prince's exposed back. Still, the dragon banner advanced, step by hard-won step, toward the Street of the Sisters and the stair that wound up Visinia's Hill. High on the hilltop, Cersei watched the approach from the battlements of Maegor's Holdfast, knuckles white on the stone. At her back, Qyburn appeared with a torch and flint, the fuse coiled like a viper in his other hand. "They breached the inner ward," he said. Cersei stared at the golden skull banner bobbing among orange spears below. "A dragon's heir," they said. Aelia's son grown beyond murder. Her gorge twisted. She thought of Tyrion, of prophecies whispered by wood witches, of the ghostly feel of Jaime's hand once warm in hers. Perhaps this was the circle closing. She held out her hand. "Give me the torch." Qyburn yielded it silently. The flame's small light flickered in the breeze, nimble and hungry. If she touched it to the fuse, within heartbeats dragonfire powder would roar through galleries beneath the keep, splitting towers, showering debris across the city. She lifted the torch head, lips parted in cold resolve. Below, the bells of the Sept of Baelor began to toll. Not slow, mournful tolling, but a clanging peal that leapt from tower to tower. The sound ripped through the clash of war like a knife through cloth. Cersei's arm faltered. Bells meant surrender, or coronation, or perhaps salvation. She turned to Qyburn, eyes narrowed. "What is that?" But Qyburn's attention fixed on the stair behind her, feet pounded up, a breathless Lannister squire shouting. "The small folk, your grace, the crowds break through the market. They carry bread in dragon colors. Gold cloaks desert in droves. Gate of the gods collapsed." Cersei heard, but her gaze strayed to the bells still ringing. She imagined the great bronze clappers striking. Who rang them? And for whom? At last she lowered the torch, its flame sputtering in a gust. She exhaled a single word like poison. "Not yet." Tyrion emerged from the hidden tunnel into a vaulted cellar where casks of sweet arbor lay stacked. Bronn levered off a plank that blocked a narrow stair spiraling upward, the path thick with dust. Somewhere above, shouting echoed. Tremors shook moldering chandeliers. The imp glanced back at the barrels in their cart, each brimming with silver stags and loaves, seized from a city granary, whose guards fled at first. Steel flashed. "You think coin enough to buy the gatehouse?" Bronn asked. "Today? It may buy hearts." He hefted 2 cloth sacks, coins chiming within. "We'll feed the hungry flight from the Sept dungeons. Show them the queen's mercy is not the queen's at all." Bronn slung his spear, grinned shark-wide. "I do like a wise-ass dwarf with a fortune at his back." They climbed, emerging behind a shuttered door onto the ground floor of an abandoned inn just off the Hill of Rhaenys. Outside, gold cloaks sprinted past, pursued by children with sticks. Jeering, Tyrion stepped into sunlight and flung a fistful of stags skyward. Silver rained. Screams of delight chased clinking metal along cracked paving stones. "Bread at the Mudgate," he cried. "Silver for any who carry wounded. Freedom for dungeons poor." Tommen Baratheon calls his city home to heal. His voice cracked, but hope soared on it, raw and desperate. By the third fistful, a river of small folk flowed the way he pointed. Bronn dragged 2 barrels onto a wheelbarrow and pushed after, laughter booming. From doorways, ragged women and toothless men emerged, eyes wide at gold-threaded cloaks, yet filled by the promise of coin and crust. The flood of commoners rose, wave upon wave, and Tyrion felt the city itself shift beneath their feet. On the Street of Steel, battle flared anew. Sir Adam Marbrand rallied remnants of loyal gold cloaks around the Smith's Guildhall, erecting a barricade of anvils and shattered wagons. Arianne urged her cavalry against it, hooves sparking on cobble. She caught Marbrand's eye across the churn of fighters, and in that flash, saw not hatred but resignation. His men fought doggedly, yet each fell meant a thread torn from the city's tapestry. A lance thrust at Marbrand, splintering on his shield. He smashed the shaft aside, raised his visor and shouted, "Enough!" The word cut above the din. He threw down his sword. One by one his men followed. A hush rolled out from the barricade, settling like snow. Arianne lowered her spear. Marbrand knelt in dented plate. "I yield the gate district. Spare the city, princess. Spare her children." Arianne's throat tightened. She nodded once, signaling her riders to stand down. 17 gold cloaks laid arms at her feet. She motioned for water bearers. The battle line blurred, swords lowering. Above them the bells tolled still, peal on peal, as if echoing this moment of surrender. In the Red Keep, Cersei felt the vibrations of those bells in her very bones. Her torch guttered to embers. She flung it against the hearth, sparks scattering. Tommen sobbed quietly nearby, hugging Sir Pounce. Cersei crossed to him, smoothing his hair. "You must be brave," she whispered. "I want Margaery. Margaery is safe." She lied. "And soon, we will be safe too." Footsteps hammered up the corridor beyond the throne room. Strong shifted his massive weight, mace ready. Cersei's pulse thundered. She grabbed Tommen's hand and motioned him behind the high seat. The doors burst open. Lord Arayn Waters staggered in, helm askew, cheeks sooty. "Your Grace, Sir Harris is dead." Gold cloaks opened the postern. Traitors inside the yard. He broke off. Behind him, 2 Lannister men-at-arms collapsed, arrows sprouting. Through the gap strode Nymeria Sand, copper hair smoke-streaked, twin daggers wet. At her shoulder loomed Jon Connington, helm off, steel bright with blood. Cersei's scream caught in her throat. Sir Robert Strong lurched forward. Connington raised a hand. "Stand aside, monstrosity," he said, "lest you meet the fate of Gregor before you." Strong answered with silence and advanced. Nymeria darted left. Connington braced. Then a voice rang through the doorway. Clear, young, authoritative. "Robert Strong, on my royal command, stand down." Prince Aegon stepped into the hall, hair ruffled, breastplate cloven, a smear of blood drying on his cheek that did not seem his. He bore no sword, only the wounded palm he raised upright. The blood of his vow dried to dark rust. "Who dares?" Cersei shrieked, but her words fractured. "Son of Elia," Connington said, bowing. Strong paused. That hulking helm shifted, as if weighing orders past and present. Cersei saw her doom in the visor's dark slit. She opened her mouth to command, and a short crossbow bolt hissed from the shadows, burying itself in the gorget seam beneath Strong's ear. Bronn stepped into view, cranking his favorite weapon with quick, efficient strokes, a grin wicked as sin. Strong swayed, mace lowering. 2 more bolts thunked into the gap of his breastplate and thigh. The giant stumbled, fell to one knee, then crashed face first, armor ringing on marble. Silence swallowed the moment. Cersei trembled, clutching Tommen to her skirts. Her son stared, wide-eyed at the fallen knight. Prince Aegon advanced 3 paces, then knelt. "Your Grace," he said to the boy, gentle, "I am told you cherish cats. I too once lost a kitten to hunger. No child should know fear. Will you trust me to keep your realm from burning?" Tommen's lip quivered. "They say you're a dragon. A dragon who would be a friend, Aegon replied. Cersei found her voice then, sharp as broken crystal. Lies. He would butcher you and claim your throne, sweetling. Aegon looked up, eyes full of sorrow. Your mother fears justice. But justice need not be blood. Come outside and hear the bells ring for peace. Tommen looked to his mother. Cersei's heart knifed inside her chest. She shook her head once, furious. But Tommen slipped from her grip, stepping to Aegon's side, clutching Sir Pounce against his chest. Aegon rose, placing a steadying hand on the child's shoulder. Bronn clicked his tongue, touching. Now about my gold. Tyrion appeared behind him, sack slung over one shoulder. Always the sellsword. He surveyed the scene. Cersei rigid, Nymeria wary, Connington triumphant, Aegon calm. He felt something crack inside. A bond to a sister who had once loved him, now reduced to ashes of ambition. Cersei's gaze snapped to him, venom dripping. Traitor, dwarf. Merely survivor, Tyrion said quietly. Qyburn inched along the wall, hand hidden in his robe. Tyrion's one good eye caught the motion. The old maester's fingers working the flint to relight a scrap of oilcloth. A fuse dangled from his sleeve like a black worm. Tyrion shouted. Nymeria leapt. Her dagger flashed, lodging in Qyburn's wrist. He shrieked. The tinder fell, snuffing against the stone. Connington kicked the maester's legs, sending him sprawling. The fuse remained unlit, curling across the floor in mocking silence. Cersei sagged, the last ember of her wildfire dream extinguished before her eyes. She stared at the crawling black cord, the serpent that failed to bite. Then she looked to Aegon. Hatred burned within her gaze, bright enough to kindle any powder. Yet powder alone could not save her now. Outside, the bells of Baelor's sept ceased at last, replaced by the roar of thousands chanting one name. No longer Aegon, nor Martell, but an unfamiliar blend. Aegon Sunborn. Aegon Sunborn! Bread and mercy spread like wind-fanned flame, lapping across the city, extinguishing fires of hunger, igniting sparks of hope. Citizens hauled aside makeshift barricades, guiding wounded to Dornish healers. Women in Tyrell Green offered water to Golden Company archers. Orphan boys carried litters for broken gold cloaks. In the span of an afternoon, enemies who had shared only swords now shared bandages, prayers, tears. Atop the Septi's great steps, Arianne stood with her captains, the prince at her side. The sun dipped west, gilding the rooftops. Somewhere inland, a lark's song rose clear, mingling with the rumble of the tide against the Blackwater wharves. A hush fell over the crowd when she lifted her hand. "People of King's Landing," she called, voice carrying between broken statues and gaping windows. "The war you feared is over. No more will children starve while lords feast. No more will mothers weep for justice denied. Today, the son of Dorne and the dragon of the old kings rise together. In their light we forge a new dawn." And she turned to Aegon, who knelt before her, drawing his sword, Blackfire remade by Volantine smiths, from its scabbard. He planted it point down upon the step, a gesture of surrender to the realm, rather than domination over it. "Will you stand with me?" he asked, voice low but steady. "To heal the wounds of Elia and Oberyn, of Rhaegar and Robert, of all the nameless dead?" Arianne placed her hand upon the pommel, and their united shadows arched long across the plaza. The crowd erupted, not with screams of victory, but with a low hum of something like relief. Prayers, perhaps, rising for the first time since the city learned dread. High above the city, ravens wheeled in crimson sky. Farther out on the Blackwater, the wrecks of scuttled Lannister ships creaked as tide took them. Some would sink, carrying iron lions to dark silt. Others would drift until nibbled to rot by time and sea-worn barnacle. So too with crowns, Arianne thought. So too with thrones. But tonight, a throne no longer glittered with blades alone. Somewhere inside the Red Keep, Tommen Baratheon sat upon a cushioned chair, Sir Pounce in lap, munching sweetbread offered by a Dornish page. Nearby, his mother stared at fading sunlight, through barred windows, while Tyrion explained patiently that mercy could be sharper than Valyrian steel. And across the realm, the first rumors galloped faster than any raven. The dragons had returned, yet they breathed not fire but promise, and their wings bore the colors of dawn. Night settled gentle upon the Blackwater, the riots of noon already myths retold in alehouses still intact. Arianne found herself atop the Mudgate Tower, gazing south where the river's dark ribbon met the greater dark of the narrow sea. Nymeria leaned beside her, flicking a wineskin. "We won," Nymeria said. Arianne shook her head. "Not yet. Winning battles is smoke. Holding peace, that is stone." She traced the parapet's chipped edge. "As dawn follows dusk, old hatreds will rise. The Reach will grumble, the North glower, the Iron Islands reeve. We will need hearts brave as Oberons and patience as deep as fathers." "Then let us drink to patience," Nymeria offered, tipping the skin. Arianne drank, the wine cool, sweet, and edged with distant sand. On the horizon, a single bright star winked into view. Venus, the Wanderer. Arianne remembered a tale her mother once whispered, that the first rulers of Dorne traced their descent from that star, crossing seas of night to set foot upon burning sand. Perhaps then, every ending was merely crossing from one shore to another. Perhaps this city, bruised and battered, would learn to walk new paths beneath the twin banners of sun and dragon. She breathed the river's night scent, thick with smoke and salt, and the faint perfume of broken orchards. She thought of Prince Aegon meditating upon his crownless victory in some chamber of the Red Keep. Of how tomorrow they must set forth decrees, balances, compensations, how histories would carve today into memory. But tonight belonged to stillness between storms. She lifted her eyes to the star, and for the span of a heartbeat, she felt Sunspear's warm breeze blow through the tower's chill air. She heard children laughing free of hunger. She felt the spear of vengeance sink softly into the sand, its iron cooled by evening tide. And she allowed herself at last a fragile smile.